Welcome to ACC Nation. That's Will Ogenin. That's right. And I'm Jim Quist. Thanks for letting us join you. We've got a lot of sports on the table. Coming up in a few minutes, we have a special interview with D1 Baseball's Erin Fitt. Going to talk a little bit about what's going on in college baseball. It's crazy stuff going on and a lot of wild things going on in the ACC. There's some things that Erin's going to share with us that is going to blow your mind. Okay, so that's coming up here in a couple of minutes. But Will and I have a ton of things to talk about, including NFL mock draft, which I think we're going to kind of split up on both sides of this because there's a lot to talk about there. I'm kind of excited about that. I always love the mock draft. Not as pumped about it this season for some reason as in the past, but I don't know. I've really gotten into watching the NFL draft.
Yeah. And I think some of that this year has to do with the fact that I just don't feel like the talent pool is as good this year as it is in years past. And there is no game changer necessarily in the way, say, Trevor Lawrence was last year. Still going to be some really good players that come out of this draft, but I just don't think there's that elite level player in this year's draft. And here we are, we're recording Monday night, and we still don't know who's going to go number one.
Yeah. Well, guys at CBS Sports have a mock draft. We're going to share some of the tidbits, the golden nuggets from that list. And they still have as their number one pick a guy out of the ACC. So we're going to find out who that is. First, some quick news here, and congratulations, Wake Forest men's golf, 22 champs for the conference. Boy, that was quite a playoff. And let me tell you something, this past weekend, when it came down to golf and tennis, off the chart sort of competition, it has been a phenomenal season. It didn't finish maybe the way a lot of people thought it was going to, but congratulations to Wake Forest men's golf team for their winning the 22 ACC championship. Then over in tennis, it was Duke taking the women's tennis championship. And again, like I said, maybe not what people thought was going to happen. Virginia took the men's tennis championship, and that was a battle. Again, that's a dominant team, but yet it wasn't a cakewalk for them whatsoever. So that was a lot of fun to watch over the weekend when I had an opportunity to flip through. And something else that's coming up, the ACC women's lacrosse bracket, that has been laid out. Play begins on the 27th this week. So in a couple of days, basically, we're recording on the 25th. So coming up on Wednesday, the 27th, it's number 8 Pitt taking on number 9 Louisville. Winner of that game, well, congratulations. You get to face the number 1 UNC on Friday, the 29th. And then number 4, Duke takes on number 5, Notre Dame. Number 2, Boston College takes on number 7, Virginia Tech. And number 3, Syracuse takes on number 6, Virginia. The ACC network is carrying all of those games. So if you really like lacrosse, like I do, I am going to be scoping out a lot of sports this week. A lot of sports. Love a lot of the spring sports. Well,
UNC is a juggernaut this year.
Absolutely.
I don't think they lost.
The Learfield numbers, and for those of you who don't follow that part of it very closely, that's basically recognizing teams across like Division I in this particular case, Directors Cup. It is the more wins that you have in your conference, you go up. And the ACC has made a heck of a surge this year in the Learfield Cup, and it's just it's amazing. It's been, I won't say it's a turnaround, but it's a surprise. There's been so much success in the conference sports wise, basically all season. So good stuff. Softball, the latest, which was basically last week's NFC USA Today top 25. The new poll is coming out this week, and we'll share that with you. Virginia Tech number 3, FSU number 5, Clemson 17, and Notre Dame 22. So that's pretty cool stuff.
There's a
Now,
pretty significant gap in the standings between those four and everybody else.
yes, yeah. But this has been a really great season for softball. I was watching some of the analysis, and I think it's Brittany McKinney doing some analysis on the huddle, not the huddle. That's football. Anyway, I was talking with Dalen and on the ACC network, and was sort of analyzing some softball. And if you don't catch that, and here's the thing, the ACC network, it really hasn't. A lot of people haven't really gotten into the groove yet. It hadn't been around long enough for people to understand what their schedule is. And sometimes I even wonder what their schedule is. But they have some really great analysis on there and some tidbits. In this particular case, they got into analyzing what was going on with ACC softball and talked a little bit about what the thoughts were about Duke. And I think that this was kind of spot on, but yet it's an assumption. And you know what happens when you assume, right? Yeah. So it was basically that, Duke is a fairly new program, and that they haven't had, experience in the limelight and whatnot. And that, they probably aren't going to do as well down the, as they get further into it, just because they don't have that experience. I tend to disagree with that theory, because sometimes teams that, you could just say, well, they don't know any better.
Yeah, that's very much true. Sometimes you don't know any better. You just kind of, yeah. That has certainly been a case a few times before, and throughout sports, where you figure, oh, they need to learn to lose to learn to win. Sometimes you're just too naive to know how to lose.
That's right. That's right. And the adrenaline is pumping, and you're having a good time, and that's what it's about. That's what wins games sometimes. So we'll keep an eye out on that. We'll see how things go this week in the latest NFC USA Today Top 25 poll that comes out this week, and we'll have it at accnation.net. Now, we were talking about women's lacrosse now, polling wise, and you were talking about UNC. Just a dominant program. The latest top 25, UNC is at number 1. Not surprised there. Number 2, Boston College. Number 3, Syracuse. It has just been this ACC run in this poll pretty much all season long. Duke is at number 7. Virginia comes in at 16, and Notre Dame at 20. I keep having to look down, even though I just looked at it a second ago.
So yeah, just to confirm, yes, UNC is undefeated, 15-0 overall.
Yeah, just an awesome run so far this season. For the men in the USILA top 20, Virginia's at number 4. Virginia has had another superb run, and this is a team to watch as postseason play comes into action, because you cannot count out Virginia in this particular instance. Speaking of not counting somebody out, number 7, Notre Dame. So that's another team to watch. Number 9, Duke, another team to watch. And then at number 18, which I'm surprised that they're not higher, but it's been a mix. UNC in that poll. So we'll see how things churn out this week, and how play, pushes them or drags them down, one or the other. Now, this is not an ACC conference sport, though I would love to see it that way. We just only have one team in the conference that actually plays in beach volleyball, NCAA sanctioned Division I, and that's Florida State. And they are almost always in the top 5, and they are, again, number 5. So the championship for that is May 6th through 8th. So that's coming up very soon. So, keep an eye on what's going on with beach volleyball there. That's always a lot of fun to watch too. Very competitive, a fun sport to watch overall. Now, one other thing going on here, track and field. Let's talk about the latest polling in track and field. On the men's side at number 18 is Florida State, number 22, Virginia. Then over on the women's side, it's number 14, NC State, and number 19, Duke. And the championship for that is June 8th through 11th. So we have a little ways to go yet for all of that. Let's talk about the NFL draft, Will. And you can pull up any of the mock drafts that you'd like. I'm looking at the CBS Sports draft. I tend to look at a lot of them, and I know that, and we've had this conversation before. Walter, yeah. A lot of people don't put a lot of, I don't know. It's sort of like, okay, yeah, we've been there, done that, and whatever. But I do look at that because those guys do have an interesting perspective, and they go deep. They basically go all the way through, and
all 7 rounds, right?
I think sometimes that's probably why they get a bad rap, is because if you go that deep, what happens is you're not going to hit on everything, right? You're going to be sometimes a couple of rounds off. But again, it's a good source. It really is a good source. Now, CBS has as their number 1 pick. It is not a quarterback. And it is a player out of the ACC. And we've talked about this dude before. So let's talk a little bit more about the impact here at round 1, pick 1 for NC State's Ikem Ekwonu, who is a offensive lineman, a 6'4", 310 pounds. And if he goes in the first, that means he goes to protect Trevor Lawrence. So that's the projected number 1 pick in the NFL draft this season. As Will said just a second ago, this year is not the Trevor Lawrence sort of draft. It's not like, one of those things, but
yeah,
he's a good player, man.
He is. It's funny because when you talk about this, I have 3 CBS Sports mock drafts in front of me, and obviously the one you're talking about has Ekwonu at number 1, but then there's other ones that have Trevon Walker of Georgia at number 1. But we've also seen Aiden Hutchinson go number 1, and like I said, we're less than 72 hours away from the draft, and the fact that we still don't know who the consensus number 1 pick is, I think says a lot to where people think of this draft. And we've speaking specifically to Ekwonu, throughout this process, he's been no worse than a top 5 pick in most mock drafts. He's been a real steady protector of Devin Leary and whatnot, and he's more than deserving of being a top 5 pick. He has all the tools to protect somebody for years to come.
We're going to get into more of the NFL mock draft and the draft, which is coming up on Thursday. It starts then. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. But first, our special guest is Erin Fitt, who is with D1 Baseball. And we're going to talk about what's going on in the world of college baseball. Hey, thanks for joining us, Erin. Omaha is coming at us fast. At the midway point of the college baseball season, we can say it's, in one word, it's been wild. One word isn't enough. Therefore, you're in the middle of this tornado. Tell us what you've seen so far.
Yeah, it has been a wild year. That is a good place to start. I mean, it just feels like, especially in the ACC, it's just so topsy turvy, and there's a lot of good teams that are beating up on each other. And you look at some of the other leagues. I mean, some of the traditional powers that are down. I mean, it's striking. To look in the top 25, and you've got Wofford and Georgia Southern ranked, but no Vanderbilt, no Mississippi State, no Ole Miss. It's been that kind of, no Florida State for that matter. I mean, it's been a weird season, but it's been fun to kind of follow this thing as it all unfolds.
Hey, the latest D1 baseball top 25 from the week of April 25th has Tennessee continuing to ride that number one spot, and convincingly, I would say.
Yeah.
Now, they're followed by Oregon, Miami, Southern Miss, Arkansas. Throw some light on what makes these teams worthy of your top five at D1 baseball.
Well, it's mostly just been consistency. These teams at this point of the year, we're 10 weeks into the season, and it's the teams that have had the most consistent years. I mean, Tennessee obviously hasn't lost a weekend. They're 37-3. I think Oregon State has lost one weekend. Miami, maybe two. Southern Miss, same, about one. I mean, Arkansas too. So I mean, that's what stands out, is winning your weekends, and all those teams are taking care of business. Most of those teams, they stand out for all, really most of college baseball. It feels like stands out for offense this year. Offense has been the name of the game, but those teams that have real pitching, like Tennessee, like Miami, like Southern Miss and Arkansas, I mean, they stand out a little bit more than everybody else because there's not a ton of really premium pitching to go around this year.
We'll jump into that here in just a few moments, a little more in detail. Let's dip into the ACC, Aaron. Let's talk about the strengths, the weaknesses on each of these teams. Is the batting, the pitching, the defense, or some of each, maybe a little pinch, and what you like about them. And we'll start with Miami, who is in your top five.
And Miami, coming into the year, we really thought the strength of this team was going to be the pitching, but they had to kind of figure out the roles. I mean, as talented as Carson Palmquist is, could he make the transition from back of the bullpen guy to being a legit Friday night ace? And obviously the answer is yes. He's having a really nice year, got 81 strikeouts in 51 innings, and that leaps off the page at you. It's really just an electric fastball with that tough low slot from the left side. And, you throw in a Carson Ligon behind him, a Jake Garland. I think a key for them has been Alejandro Rosario kind of figuring it out after a slow start. He's come on a little bit. I like the bullpen pieces a lot. They've got the best closer in the country, in my opinion, in Andrew Walters. So the pitching still does stand out, but I think the position player group has proven to be better maybe than we thought it would be. There were, again, a lot of question marks about that group heading into the year, not a lot of proven commodities. I mean, you had Yo-Yo Morales, but beyond that, it was a lot of, I mean, maybe, there's talent here, but those guys have figured it out pretty good. CJ Kafis is having a huge year, and Jacob Burke, the transfer from Southeastern Louisiana, he's been a big time addition for him. I just, I like the overall balance of the lineup. It's not like a classic, vintage Miami lineup where they're just going to bash you over the skull, but they have sometimes. I mean, they've scored some runs, especially the last few weeks. They've gotten those bats going a little bit. So I just think they're a pretty complete club.
Let's stay in the top 10. Look at number 7, the Hokies. And is this a surprise team for you? And,
Yeah.
and what are their strengths and weaknesses?
Yeah, this is a surprise team. And it was a team, heading into the season, there's like this big clump of teams outside our preseason top 25 that all seemed interesting, but all had question marks. And, if you would have told me heading into the year that any one of those teams, Virginia Tech being certainly one of them, was going to make a run and be a top 25 club, I would be like, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, they definitely had top 25 talent in the lineup. It was just a matter of, would the pitching come together? This is a recurring theme in college baseball this year. Did they have enough arms? And I mean, I saw Griffin Green, their ace in the fall, and I walked away thinking, all right, like, this guy's got talent, but the track record wasn't there. Let's see him do it. Let's see him put it together, and he's done so. I mean, that's been a big key for them. And then Drew Hackenberg, the freshman, has been awesome. I mean, he might be certainly one of the front runners for ACC Freshman of the Year. Tommy White, of course, comes to mind, but Hackenberg has been really a huge key. I mean, he's 8-0 with a 2 ERA, as a true freshman in the ACC. That's really loud, but definitely what stands out about this team is that this is a team that can bludgeon you over the skull. because they've got big time firepower in that lineup. Of course, you got a first rounder with Gavin Cross, who started to heat up after kind of a modest start. He's putting up numbers as always. And then Jack Hurley, who's just a dynamic power speed guy, is having a huge year. I mean, he's really come into his own, a guy that had flash talent before, but the results hadn't necessarily followed last year. And this year, those results have come in a big way. And then Tanner Schobel, that's the other, I think, and Cade Hunter. I mean, really, it's hard to just limit yourself with this team. They got a lot of guys, but Tanner Schobel and Cade Hunter are other pieces that have just taken that big leap this year from last year to this year. And they're strong up the middle performers, catcher and shortstop. You really love to be strong at those positions. And Virginia Tech is.
I find it interesting with Hackenberg. He's sort of got a family tradition to live up to there.
Yeah.
He's making his own way without any problem, especially with the performance this year is certainly impressive to say the least. Next team up is a team that's had a little bit of an up and down sort of beginning to the season. At number 11, it's Virginia. What's going on there exactly? Because I can't quite put my finger on it.
Well, they ran out of the gate, with that big, long winning streak against really soft non-conference competition. And so I think people maybe thought, well, this team's a national championship kind of team because they're 14-0. They're beating the heck out of everybody, but they didn't play anybody those first few weeks. And then they kept it going in ACC play. Really, they won their first 4 series. I mean, Duke, Boston College, Wake Forest, Georgia Tech. And at that point, you started to take them seriously. And then they stumbled. They had that stretch where I think they lost like 7 out of 8 games there against Miami and Pitt in particular. And then they rebounded last weekend with a big sweep in North Carolina. So you're right. It has been a little up and down. But overall, I mean, they've really just had 2 bad weeks, out of 10. So that's pretty good. I mean, it's another very offensive team. And we wanted to see if they had the arms. I'm going to say this a lot, but I mean, Nate Savino, was the guy they were really counting on to be their ace now. He's a high profile recruit. I think he was the number 1 ranked freshman in his class coming in out of high school that showed up on campus. And, he just hadn't missed any bats his first 2 years. You looked at the numbers and it's like, that's a really low strikeout rate. Can this guy really be a frontline ACC guy? I mean, he's a sinker ball guy, so you don't need a ton of strikeouts if you can pitch to contact and get those ground balls. But, he got off to a great start. I mean, he was really good the first half of the season, and then he stumbled a little bit, but rebounded this past week. So that's a huge key for them. I like the way the bullpen has come together with Jay Woolfolk, another very talented young player, a 2-sport guy, of course, dynamic athlete with a power arm, and Brandon Neek back there. I mean, they've kind of had to figure out the roles a little bit on the mound, but it feels like it's stabilized some. And so that's going to be a fascinating series this weekend in Charlottesville between the Hokies and the Cavaliers, 2 teams that can really swing the bats
and don't like each other at all.
No.
Brian Gursky, what are your thoughts on his play so far?
He's been good. A transfer from USC. They were really counting on to kind of solidify the rotation with that veteran presence. And it's not like sexy stuff, it's not going to, he's not gonna be a high profile draft guy, but boy, you get an experienced college lefty that knows how to pitch and you stick him in your rotation and he eats innings for you. He's been great. He's been really a key piece for him.
Can't go wrong with a lefty ever.
Yeah.
Not that I know, because but I like watching them play. Let's go down to number 16, Louisville. Now, typically at the beginning of the season, when it comes to ACC teams, we're always talking about Louisville. But here we have right in the middle of the top 25 at number 16, Louisville. And again, this is one of those teams I just can't quite figure out what's happening here. So give us some insight.
Once again, very offensive club. That's the strength of this team. There's no question about it. I mean, you got real thump there with Cam Masterman and Dalton Rushing, these just big-bodied physical power hitters. And then Ben Metzinger, the veteran. Dan McDonald has talked about how talented this guy is as a pure hitter for a while now. And he's had injury issues in his career, but this year he's really figured it out. I mean, he's hit for average before, but now he's got the power piece too. He's got 14 home runs, leads the team. And so that's been a big development for them. He's just a really good winning player, but it's a lineup that has a lot of depth. I mean, Christian Knapczyk is a really good player, and Jack Payton, again, up the middle, right? Catcher, shortstop, key spots for him. They've been good there. But the question with Louisville is, do they have the pitching? And this is, we've been saying that a lot, but this is a team that I wonder a little bit more about, because their pitching numbers aren't great. I mean, I think Jared Polin is a very talented righty that can shut you down with power stuff, and came in as a two-way guy, and eventually kind of transitioned to being a full-time pitcher. And now that he's had more time to focus just on that skill, I think he's really taken off as a starter. He'd been a bullpen guy before. Now he's settled in, having a really good year in the rotation. But after that, I just feel like there's question marks, and they just haven't gotten a lot of consistency on the mound. And Michael Persecki's been good at the back end. But I think we still need to see a little bit more here. We need to see that pitching come together for me to take them seriously as an Omaha kind of team.
Okay. And the last ACC team in the top 25 is at number 18, Notre Dame. Now, they do have a really bright spot on their pitching staff.
Yeah, John Michael Bertrand has been fantastic, and it's another one of those, like, not like a sexy prospect, but he just wins. He's a really, really polished veteran pitcher. I mean, his numbers are fantastic. He's got a 1.6 ERA. He is missing bats, even though it's not like wipeout stuff. I mean, it's good enough stuff. Just a great college pitcher, a guy that you'd love to have anchor your rotation. And this Notre Dame team is just solid once again. I mean, for them, you lose maybe your two most important pieces from last year, Nico Cavadas, of course, and Tanner Cole up in the bullpen. And so the question was, all right, well, how are they going to replace these two guys? And their lineup hasn't really missed a beat. I mean, they remain a very good, complete offensive team that just battles you and grinds you down. And you're not going to see a ton of home run numbers here. There are a few guys with some pop, but it's just veterans who've got so many at bats under the belt. They're a difficult team to pitch to. And the pitching, I mean, it's kind of like last year. They just piece it together. It's not a lot of premium stuff, but it's mix and match, and it's different looks from the right side and the left side. And, they just had a very interesting year because I think every one of their ACC weekends has resulted in a sweep. Either they've swept or they've been swept. Two of those were weather shortened, NC State and Pitt. But last week they get swept at Duke, who was struggling. They were 3-12 heading into that series. They're playing better now. They just won another series to get at Georgia Tech. Duke did. But that seemed like a stumbling block, obviously, for Notre Dame, and they come right back and they sweep Wake Forest, who's a good club. So, you can't ever count Notre Dame down. They bounce back when they struggle, and when they were swept at Louisville, and then Virginia Tech the following week, a one game thing, they came right back and swept Florida State and Clemson back-to-back weekends. So they've run a little hot and cold, but you look up at the end of the day, they're 26-8. And they're 11-7 in the league, tied for first place in their division. So business as usual for them.
Nothing to sneeze at. The week of April 20th, D1 Baseball delivered the field of 64 projections. You guys blew my mind. You've got 10 ACC teams in your field of 64. You got 4 number 1 seeds. You've got 4 number 2 seeds. I know that you've got a number 1 seed in there. There's, I'm looking at that field and I'm going, wow. What you said earlier when we were talking about how the ACC has just been sort of wild and intense. Let's talk a little bit about that field of 64 and what you see there and what we might expect on the road to Omaha.
Yeah, I think ACC is kind of clearly the deepest league in college baseball this year. Usually you say that about the SEC. This year, there's a big gap in the SEC between the top half and the bottom half. There's a bunch of teams that are 6-12, name brand teams too, like Florida and Ole Miss and Mississippi State, those kinds of teams. But in the ACC, it's just, you go 10 deep comfortably. And, even this week when we update the field, I think we'll still have 10 ACC teams in because, Pitt's got a nice resume and Wake Forest has some nice wins. And, NC State is just kind of lurking right there, 11-9. They feel like they're still on the verge of maybe making a run toward a host. They need to bounce back from that series loss to Louisville, but they've got certainly the ability. And Florida State, I still believe, is going to be a real dangerous club in the postseason with their pitching. It's just that their offense is just okay. But pitching really matters when you get to postseason, and there's not a lot of teams that can match Florida State on the mound. So, and then you've got teams behind that. They're kind of lurking, Duke, we just talked about, they were dead. They were 3-12. Now they've won back-to-back series. They're up to 8-13 in the league. And it's like, is this another one of those Chris Pollard second half surges? Maybe they need to finish very strong still, but if they can get to 14 ACC wins, they probably get in. And North Carolina is still alive at 8-13. They've really faded, but they're not dead yet. They're still lurking on the periphery. And then you got Clemson, who again looked like they were in a whole lot of trouble. And then this past weekend, just a huge series win against Florida State for them. They took 2 out of 3 out Wake Forest last week. And so 6-11 in the league, like right now, they're not a regional team, but if they can finish strong, they could get back into the mix. So you could see a path for 12 different teams to get in there. They're not going to get 12 regional bids, but they could certainly get 10. Maybe one of these other teams on the edge fades, like a Wake Forest who stumbled the last 2 weeks, or Pittsburgh. I mean, one of those teams could fall back and it'd be a 9-bid league. But right now, 10 feels like the number.
All right, we're going to do 2 teams here. First, we'll take the ACC since that's what we're focusing on, and then we'll go at large and any conference, any team. What team do you see that can sneak up and bite you and make a deep run toward Omaha and maybe even getting a title?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned Florida State first because that's Parker Messick, Bryce Hubbard, and then if Davis Hare pitches well in the postseason, and I mean that's a good postseason, a really good quality arm in the bullpen. Jonas Scalaro, you guys have a lot of experience, and then you look at I think a big key for them is Ross Dunn. I mean, who's got elite stuff, and has shown flashes of brilliance, but it's been up and down. I mean, I think that's a first round talent next year if he can come on strong. Florida State's the team, because I just, you look around the league, who else is, besides Miami, who else has got that kind of pitching? And the answer is nobody. And so that said, they can't kick the ball around like they did on Sunday at Clemson. A lot of errors. That's maybe a little bit of a concern, is the defense piece as well as the offense piece. So it's a flawed team, but that's why we're talking about them as a sleeper pick at this point in the season. They're outside the top 25. But boy, I can't shake the feeling that that's a team that can make a run.
I guess we'll see, right?
Yeah.
I got one last question for you. And I know at some point you've probably seen this guy, and you briefly alluded to him a couple of minutes ago. When you see Tommy White from NC State stepping up to the plate, what's going through your mind?
Yeah, I'm getting my camera out. I mean, that's the answer. I'm usually trying to hustle from behind the plate to get down the side so I can get a side view, because something's going to happen. It feels like, and it's obviously it's huge power. I mean, and what stands out about it too is that it's power middle away. He'll drive the ball out to center and right. That's really where his power is right now. But he also, that's kind of an evidence of his mature approach. I mean, he's a guy for a power hitter who's a tough out. I mean, controls the strike zone fairly well. I mean, not as well maybe as I thought he would. I thought he would have more walks at this point in the season, but I mean, his bat to ball skills are pretty good. He shortens up with 2 strikes. He can put the ball in play. I mean, he's hitting 365, even though he's got 18 home runs. So it's not just a all or nothing approach. But he's just, whenever he steps to the box, there's a different energy in the stadium, especially at home. He's captivated the imaginations of Wolfpack Nation, and it's kind of an experience when he steps up. It's a lot of fun.
Fun stuff. I know it's fun. I have not seen him in person, but I tell you what, watching the video, it just amazes me. And then when I found out he was a freshman, obviously that's been some time ago, but when he started getting on that role, I'm going, this guy's a freshman.
Yeah.
Stagger.
He's so physical, he just certainly doesn't look like a freshman, but it's he's got a great personality too. It just seems like a really fun player.
That's great. From D1 Baseball, our special guest, Erin Fitt. Erin, I always enjoy having you come by and talk about baseball, and giving us this midseason view, just kind of get an idea to wrap our heads around all this insanity that's been going on this spring, which is just absolutely delightful. Now, before you head off, I just want to say to everybody, make sure you subscribe to D1 Baseball. Some of the best resources that in writing and coverage of college baseball. And that's why we love having Erin on and to talk about what's going on. So Erin, thank you so much for dropping by.
Thank you, Jim. I enjoyed it.
All right, let's get back into NFL football, man. Thank you, Erin, for dropping by. Every time Erin comes by and joins us, he is so energetic. He's got so much going on. He's seen so many games. I really love that the last bit of the conversation there. We were talking about a specific player at NC State, and It's so funny to hear him talk about, what he does when he comes to the plate, and it's kind of neat. So um, let's get back to looking at mock draft stuff here. Round one, pick 14 in this latest CBS mock draft is Jermaine Johnson, the second, an edge out of Florida State. Um, Before we get into that, and he is projected to go to Baltimore. One of the things that I'm looking at here on this list, Will, you know, we're not talking about guys who are glitter. We're talking about the guys who are in the trenches doing the hard work.
Mhm.
And that's what I see. I see everybody is going for, we need to restock the guys who make this happen, who make the game go. And you may not hear their names a lot when there's a conversation going on about, who's your favorite NFL player, who's really, because people always talk about quarterbacks or wide receivers, people who are making the points. Well, the people who make that happen are the guys who are on the line, who are linebackers and whatnot. That's what it looks to me like everybody's stocking up on. So,
And that's really kind of especially edge rushers is kind of where this draft is deep in this year. And going back to, go ahead, where are football games won? This has been said for years, in the trenches.
that's
You
right.
need a good offensive line to protect your quarterback, or to protect, or to open up holes for your running back. Conversely, you need a good defensive line to create havoc, against the opposing quarterback, to either sack them or force a bad throw to get a turnover or whatnot. And like I said, this is probably the deepest position of the draft as a defensive lineman. You look at it. I mean, Jermaine Johnson was ACC Defensive Player of the Year, and he's looking at, maybe even going middle of the first round, maybe even sooner, depending on who you ask. You remember, he was just so good this year. I mean, he was he was part of Georgia's D line, but everyone knows they're so deep that you weren't going to get a shot to play, and it just tells you just how good Johnson was. He comes over to the Florida State, gets an opportunity to play, and just crushes it, and turning that into being at worst a mid first round pick, and going to a team like Baltimore, who we've known to be a really good defensive team. Maybe not so much the last couple of years, but rebuilding that defense, it's not a bad idea to go get an edge rusher, especially somebody like Johnson, who can get to the quarterback very well.
Yeah, that will make a big difference with how the Ravens go. And you're talking about maybe not in the last couple of years, correct? But prior to that Ravens defense has just been a monster.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess they've built their offense now, and it works. We know it works. It's proven that it works. And so go ahead and rebuild that defense, and then you have a Super Bowl contender. It's interesting to me that quarterbacks just don't seem to be a commodity that people are all that interested in this year. And I don't know that it's a lack of talent, because it really isn't. Just that everybody has their quarterback, or at least two quarterbacks that are worthy of play. So it's not a big demand. And first round, there's only that I saw only one quarterback going in the first round, which just kind of blows my mind.
Yeah, it's so funny. When this process was going on, everybody was thinking, oh, Kenny Pickett may go top 10 to probably Carolina, because they desperately need a plug and play quarterback, because we all know Sam Darnold ain't it. And
This is true.
and their coach is on the hot seat coming into the season, and like I said, Kenny Pickett's the most plug and play ready quarterback of this group. But I've not really seen it in him. Not to discredit, he's a good quarterback, good college quarterback. I'm just not sure it all necessarily translates to the pros. He's not going to be he's probably not going to be a multi-time Pro Bowler, but he's going to be somebody, they want to try to plug him in. But this mock draft, the one years from me, I didn't even see him in the first round. It's so weird.
No.
And the one that everyone loves is the one who is not going to be ready this year, Malik Willis of Liberty.
Right.
He's been, mocked to some teams that, don't need a quarterback right away necessarily. I've seen him going to Pittsburgh. The one you're talking about, I think, is going to New Orleans.
Right.
They'll have Jameis Winston. I mean, that's not exactly a proven commodity there. And he turns the ball over quite a bit. But if you're, want to get, he's worth, the 1 year to try to get Willis groomed and ready to take over. But yeah, it's weird how much mock drafts change over time. You start to see, the think tank get changed so much just because you're getting closer. I'm like, oh, maybe they're over evaluating what they're seeing just to kind of talk themselves out of something. I don't know.
I hate to say this because I really do like Malik Willis. I think that's somebody who's been over evaluated. Here's my reasoning behind this. Okay. No, not to downgrade Liberty's football program. I'm not, because they've come a long way in a very short order. They've done okay for themselves. They have certainly proven themselves against some ACC opponents. But look at the overall schedule and then take a dynamic player like Malik Willis and put him in that scenario. And he really stands out, so maybe it's like, oh, he stands out so much, but who is he playing?
Yeah, exactly. And even go back to 2020, they beat Virginia Tech and lost late to NC State. If I'm trying to remember this off the top of my head, but I think that was the year he had Antonio Gandy Golden, who was drafted by Washington. I'm trying to do this off the top of my head without notes. I think that's what happened. And I don't think he had quite that receiver in 21. So maybe I don't feel like his stats didn't pop out as much, but he's still a really good quarterback. Obviously they don't NFL talent hasn't exactly grown on trees at Liberty University. And a lot of that has to do with, Hugh Freeze was a good coach.
Right.
But I think he had something there and he turned him out into something really good. But yeah, all in all, it's not like he's had the schedule has had its moments, let's just say.
Yeah. All right, round one, pick 24, Zion Johnson, an offensive lineman out of Boston College. He's 6'3", 312, and he is projected to go to the Dallas Cowboys.
This going back to the combine or senior day, really the Senior Bowl, he's been somebody that's been a lot of people have hyped up because he's willing to learn every position on the offensive line. I know he's tried out at center during the Senior Bowl. Obviously, he never done it before, so he wasn't that great. But hey, he's willing to learn and do whatever it takes. And someone with that kind of mentality, you're gonna like. And it's not like Dallas used to have a really good offensive line, but through injuries, and salary cap issues and just play dropping off, they need a little bit of work on that offensive line. And Zion Johnson would be a good value pick at that point in the first round.
I think he would be too. I think it'd be a huge pickup and definitely an improvement for Dallas. And I'm not a big fan of the owners. Sort of like Dallas and Washington, both just anyway. So round one, pick 27, Andrew Booth, cornerback out of Clemson. This, I think, is a good. He's come up in definitely his stock has risen. He is projected to go to Tampa Bay, which I know will make our buddy Chris happy. I think they absolutely need some corner help there.
That's probably the weakness of their defense is corner. And Booth, he's had a pretty solid career at Clemson. Someone who's pretty much, his stock has pretty much stayed the same the whole time. Maybe gone up a little bit. He might have been a borderline first round pick at one point, but he's someone, again, at 24, Tampa needs a corner. All the best ones will probably be gone. So you can't go wrong with a guy like Booth. I know he's got a pretty good knack for the football.
Let's go into round 2, and this is where we're going to find our quarterbacks from the ACC. Coming in at 41, Sam Howell out of North Carolina is projected to go to Seattle. I think that's an interesting direction for both.
Yeah, and someone, Seattle obviously rebuilding a little bit at quarterback. They traded Russell Wilson to Denver. They have Drew Lock, who, again, like we said earlier with Sam Darnold, he ain't it either. But they have ready-made weapons. Obviously, DK Metcalf is a really, really good receiver. So they need somebody to throw the football to him. And Howell, I think, would do well there. I think, obviously, again, he has ready-made weapons, but the question is he good enough to eventually unseat Drew Lock? And I would not be surprised if he was drafted there, that by the end of the season he'd be starting.
I would agree with that analysis, Will. I really think that Howell is a smart guy. I think he's very talented, and if given the right situation, he's going to pick that up very quickly and probably take the reins of that team very, very fast. We'll see. It's all up to the coaches. Most coaches want to plug and play almost immediately these days, which sometimes is detrimental depending on who you get. I'm hoping they don't do that to Malik Willis, because I don't think he's ready to.
Me too.
But like
100% agree with you, Jim.
Like to see him succeed. I like to see all these guys succeed at the NFL level. Sometimes it doesn't happen. And we spoke of Kenny Pickett, the quarterback out of Pittsburgh. He is selected at number 43 in the second round and projected to go to the Atlanta Falcons. That's kind of a nice, for me, I feel that.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird that he went from number 6 and some people's mock drafts to here at 43, but Atlanta needs a quarterback. I mean, they're starting over. They traded Matt Ryan to Indianapolis. They signed Marcus Mariota, who has been a backup in Vegas for a couple of years. Now he's going to get the start in that offense, at least for 1 year. I don't know if to kind of bridge the gap, but Pickett, we've talked about him already. Earlier, he's probably the most ready-made quarterback of all the ones that are going to be drafted in these first couple of rounds. And you know what? He could, he'll probably, I don't know if he'd beat out Murray over the starting job, but just like I talked about earlier, with the last quarter, it wouldn't surprise me by the end of the season he ends up starting.
Yeah, I can see that too. I can see that Kenny Pickett, also smart guy. He is a journeyman, and he is going to put his head down and work hard to get where he needs to be. And that seems like a good fit. I don't know what about there's a vibe there for me that Pickett in Atlanta will do well. It seems like Atlanta always goes with quarterbacks that sort of fit that mold. So we'll see how that all works out. Listen, again, NFL draft, the 28th through the 30th. We're going to be watching that and seeing how ACC players do. A lot of stuff going on this week. We're going to keep you updated on that. Our special thanks to D1 Baseball's Erin Fitt for talking about what's going on in the world of college baseball. We've got a lot more sports coming up for you right here at ACC Nation. Thank you for joining us. Have a good week.
Score.